off now. Good morning. My name is Will Taylor. I'm the Systems Advocate for Placer Independent Resource Services. We're a nonprofit devoted to helping people with disabilities live, work, and recreate in the community. We serve people of all disabilities, and we help advise individuals as well as agencies about accommodations. If you need an accommodation, please give us a call at 530-885-6500. Hope that's right. 6100. I was close. This morning we're doing a presentation by the League of Women Voters. We're going to go over the propositions on the November ballot. There are 17 propositions, and we probably will not have time to get through them all today, but we'll do as many as we can in the time we have allowed. I'd like to introduce Mary Ellen Oliveira and Karen Anghusen from the League of Women Voters, and I'll let them start.
Thank you for having us. Just a brief mention. The League of Women Voters was started about 100 years ago when women first got the right to vote. They figured out very quickly that it was challenging to find places where they could get unbiased information so they could make decisions, because the very last thing they wanted was to have somebody tell them how to vote. So they came like study groups, and eventually men figured out that, oh, I have a hard time finding it too, and so we also have male members. And at the state and national levels, they may do some advocacy, but in Placer County, we're strictly an educational group, so we don't take positions, and we try really hard not to give our personal opinions, so we'll try to do that today, so that, we just, something like this seems to be very challenging. There's a very large ballot, and people have lots of questions, so we'll get right to it. For those of you that need more information, the League of Women Voters has lots of information on their website, and there is a resource called Ballotpedia, like Wikipedia, only it's Ballotpedia, and it has lots of information. What's especially intriguing about that one is it documents the funding contributions. So and who and how much. So if that's something that's of interest to you, you might want to check Ballotpedia. We'll start with Proposition 51, which is a school bond funding for K-12 and community college facilities. And this would authorize $9 billion in general obligation bonds for new construction and modernization of K-12 public school facilities, charter schools, and vocational educational facilities. General obligation bonds are paid for by your taxes. Therefore, taxpayers must approve them. So that's why this is on the ballot. Right now, we have pretty much run out of all the money that we voted between 1998 and 2006. It's pretty well all gone. Most schools have matching funds built into their program, so it isn't all built on state money. It is also with local monies. So this proposal would authorize the state to sell $9 billion in general obligation bonds. $7 billion goes to K-12 public, charter, and vocational schools, and $2 billion goes to community college facilities. The state would likely issue these bonds over about a 5-year period and make payments again from the general fund. It takes about 35 years to pay them off. So the average payment per year is about $500 million, which is less than 1/2 of 1% of the state's current general fund budget. So the yes vote means the state could sell $9 billion in general obligation bonds for educational facilities, and a no vote means the state could not. It does not have the authority to do so. Supporters tell you that a statewide bond is the best option for meeting California's school construction needs, and local voters will still be in control of how the bonds are spent. Opponents say local school bond measures work better than statewide bonds, And they're also saying local control is the best way to minimize government waste. Currently, as of the 2nd of this month, $9 million, almost $10 million has been raised in support of this proposition. And it comes basically from education groups, including our state superintendent, Torkelson. He has a small slush fund that he has contributed to that. Community college facilities, teachers, and some construction and real estate groups. As of that date, there is no opposition registered and no opposing funds have been raised at this point. So,
Good.
52, Marianne.
All right, I have Proposition 52, which asks this question. Should a fee be charged on private hospitals to facilitate Medi-Cal funding and to be made permanent? And secondly, should the legislature's ability to change this be limited? And C, should the state constitution be amended to exclude this revenue from California's educational funding calculations? The situation right now, Medi-Cal program provides a basic health care benefits to low-income Californians, 13 million people. Generally, the state and the federal government share the costs of this program equally, but some of the costs from the federal government pays more than the state. Since 2009, the state has charged most private hospitals a fee, currently $4.6 billion, which funds the state's share of increased Medi-Cal benefits and generates the state general fund savings. Between state funds and the federal funds, hospitals realize a $3.5 billion net benefit in this payment. Since this began, the legislature has extended this 4 times and could possibly extend it beyond if this passes. However, its ending date is January 1, 2018. So the proposal is to make Proposition 52 permanent. The legislature could end the fee by 2/3 vote in each house and increase it from the current majority requirement. Changes to the fee generally would require future voter requirement. The state constitution requires an annual minimum funding of K-12 education based on general fund revenue. And under this current practice, 52 would exclude the fees from these calculations. The fiscal effect on this is uncertain because it's not known whether or not the legislature would have to extend the fee again. A yes vote means an existing charge imposed on most private hospitals that is scheduled to end January 1, 2018 under the current law would be extended permanently. It would be harder for the legislature to make changes to it, and revenue raised from it would used to create savings in increased payments for hospital services. A no vote means an existing charge imposed on most hospitals would end. Supporters say this proposition ensures that the state will continue to receive the $3 billion a year in federal funds. And who's supporting it? Well, guess who? The hospitals.
This also does prevent the legislature from diverting.
Right.
Because this is what they have done in the past.
Right.
When the $3 billion comes in from the feds, it doesn't all go to Medicare. And that's servicing about 1/3 of California's population.
Right. Okay, should we go on to 53?
Okay.
Oh, this is a fun one. This is requiring voter approval of revenue bonds. Now, the question is, should statewide voters be required to vote on revenue bonds that can be issued or sold for state projects where the bond amount exceeds $2 billion? Now, the state funds its operation and infrastructure by using annual tax revenue, which is pay as you go, and by borrowing money through selling bonds. There are 2 main kinds of bonds, general obligation bonds and revenue bonds. The state repays its general obligation bonds out of the state funds. Revenue bonds are typically repaid using revenue received from funds and other charges paid by the users, such as bridge tolls, rents, and utility rates. General obligation bonds require statewide voter approval before the state can issue them. Revenue bonds, however, do not require statewide voter approval under existing law. So the proposal is that the statewide voter approval should be required for revenue bonds to be issued or sold by the state for any projects costing over $2 billion. And this would apply to all projects financed and owned and operated or managed by the state. The fiscal effect would be unknown at this time as this government and what?
We don't know if the voters would approve.
Yeah,
This applies to
right.
2 projects.
2 projects, right. And primarily it's applying to 2 projects that are well-funded by one couple down in the valley. Can you remember their last name?
The 2 projects, if we tell you the 2 projects, it will make more sense.
All right. The one project is the bullet train, and the other one is the
Twin tunnels.
twin tunnels, the water issue. So now the proposition supporters say it will ensure that voters directly choose whether or not the state can implement extremely large, expensive projects, such as the bullet train and the proposed tunnels. It closes the loophole so that the state law requires voter approval for these general obligation bonds. Now, opponents say this will take away local control by requiring a statewide vote for many local projects, even when they're funded by local users and ratepayers. It will prevent or delay repair and maintenance of the state water systems. It will prevent or delay repair and maintenance of infrastructure projects and systems after emergencies. And it will jeopardize California's long-term economic health and safety.
And the funds in support of this come from one couple
Right.
that have a large farming enterprise near Fresno, so they will be impacted by both of these 2 large projects. And if you vote yes, you're basically saying you want those projects stopped until the voters approve the
$2 billion.
revenue bonds for each of them. So it could either, we've already started the bullet train, so that would stop things there, and it would stop any consideration about the water tunnels until the voters approve that.
Okay. Proposition 54, legislature proceedings. Okay, now this is a good one. Should all the bills before the legislature be printed in their final form and posted online 72 hours before being voted on, and should all public meetings of the legislature be videotaped and posted online within 24 hours? Right now, legislative rules govern the process by which bills become laws. Legislators go ahead and discuss these in their meetings, make changes, and so forth. However, bills can be dramatically changed in the last minute and include hundreds of pages of new text. This is known as gut and amend. And every word of the bill is changed. Now, when this happens, no one has an opportunity to even read the bill or know it. The public can't read it. Even legislators cannot read it in the final form. Additionally, the recordings of the legislature's public proceedings are not always made public, so meetings and discussions about the bill can take place unobserved by the public or the press without any record of what is said. The proposal require that every bill in its final form be made available to the legislators and published on the internet at least 72 hours before the vote, except in a case of an emergency. Require the legislature to make audio-visual recordings of all public meetings and ensure that all these recordings be available on the internet for viewing within 24 hours. And allow anyone to record public legislative works and allow recordings of public legislative meetings to be used for any legitimate purpose. Now, fiscal effect. Likely one-time cost of $1 million to $2 million to buy the cameras and the other equipment needed to be using this. However, these costs would be less than 1% of the legislature's budget. A yes vote would mean any bill would have to be made available to the legislatures and posted on the internet for at least 72 hours before the legislature can pass it. The legislature would have to ensure that its public meetings be recorded. A no vote means rules and duties of the legislatures would not change. Supporters say Proposition 54 will give the public and their elected officials time to read and express their opinions. All right,
Okay.
it's your turn.
All right. Proposition 55 is a tax extension to fund education and health care. Currently, we passed an tax on the high income folks of the state to fund education. We also passed a 0.25% sales tax. This is due to expire in 2018. Okay. This proposal would extend the income tax on those high income folks. Regardless of how you vote, the 0.25% sales tax goes away at the end of 2018. But this extension would extend the taxes on the high income taxpayers of California through 2030. All right. And this year, the Prop 30 income tax increases raised about $7 billion for education. We do have a minimum requirement for education, Prop 98, which specifies the percentage of income tax that gets put to schools. And then also local property taxes contribute to that. Right now, Medi-Cal program provides help to about 1/3 of our population and relies heavily on federal funding and receives some support from state resources. This proposal would extend those income tax increases for another 12 years. And just to give you an example, one single taxpayer's income of $300,000 would have an additional tax of $370. And a married couple with an income of $2 million would have an additional tax of $37,980. I know that applies to all of us in this room. These additional revenues continue to provide funds for K-12 and community colleges, but it also is directed to Medi-Cal based on a new funding. That would, again, the sales tax does not get extended. It goes away at the end of 2018. So this increase would be used for education, healthcare services and low-income people, and other state budget purposes. The amount varies depending on the economic year. Could range for anywhere from $4 to $9 billion of additional taxing revenue. This tax increase also contributes to our famous rainy day budget fund that the state is trying to acquire to pad itself from economic uncertainties. So a yes vote means the tax increases on high income taxpayers scheduled to end after 2018 would be extended to 2030. And a no vote means those income tax increases would expire at the end of 2018. Supporters say Prop 55 maintains existing tax rates, so there's really no tax increase to anybody. And there is some strict accountability as to where the funds are spent. And opponents say the voters who approved Prop 30 years ago were promised that the increases would be temporary, not permanent. And some folks say it's not needed. For finance purposes, almost $50 million has been contributed or raised for support of this proposition. And it comes from education groups, including the early education folks, hospitals, teachers, non-certificated school employees, the custodians and secretaries, and the SEIU local, which is a service union. And as of the day, October 2nd, there's no PAC registered in opposition, and they've contributed no money.
That's even better.
That's even better.
All right, I have the cigarette tax increase. Should California increase taxes on tobacco and electronic cigarette products containing nicotine to fund health care and tobacco control programs? The situation. Tobacco products are subject to state and federal excise tax. California imposes excise tax on distributed plus sales and local taxes paid by consumers on the final price of the purchase. California's average retail price per pack is about $6, which includes $2.40 in taxes, 87 cents in state excise tax, and $1.01 in federal excise tax, and an average of 50 to 60 cents in sales tax. Currently, this excise tax is equivalent to $1.37 per pack. The proposal. 56 would increase the amount of state excise tax by $2 per pack, totaling $2.87 per pack, equivalent of $3.37 excise tax for other tobacco products, including electronic cigarettes. The revenue from the excise tax increase would go directly into a new fund supporting existing tobacco control and health programs. Some monies would go to enforce tobacco-related laws. 56 would amend California's constitution to exempt the measure spending from state spending limit and exempt revenues from minimum funding requirements for education, similar to the earlier voter-approved tobacco tax. The analysis reports that the 56 will reduce the purchase of tobacco products and change how they buy their products. However, 56 is estimated to generate $1.3 billion to $1.6 billion in new excise tax. A yes vote means that we would increase the price of excise tax from $2.80 to $2.87. State excise tax on other products would also increase. No vote means that you would not change any of the existing taxes on cigarettes or other excise products. Supporters say cigarette smoking kills more than 40,000 Californians annually. Tobacco tax increase is one of the most effective ways to reduce this. Opponents say that this is, while it appears to be, it's not what it appears to be. Insurance companies will be paying out $1 billion more for treating the same Medi-Cal patients they treat today. Guess who is sponsoring that?
All of the opposition has come from the tobacco industry.
Yes, all
the
of it.
supporters are the AIDS Initiative, healthcare providers, doctors. Right now, California has one of the lowest smoking rates in the nation. Therefore, the funds that we have been generated in the past for education and anti-tobacco actions have diminished. So this is a way to get more funds for that. It's also a way to discourage people from smoking.
Right. Okay, now, juvenile criminal sentencing. They've lumped a lot of things into this one. Should prison inmates convicted of certain nonviolent crimes be considered for early parole, and should judges decide when juveniles should be prosecuted as adults? Right now, the prison sentences in California are set at either a fixed amount of time, which is the minimum, but not specific amount of maximum time. The majority of the prisoners are serving a fixed sentence. Some of them are eligible for parole after serving half of their sentence. Those serving intermittent sentences are eligible for parole, hearing once they have served their minimum sentences. In 2011, the federal court ordered California to reduce its prison population to 137.5% of capacity. Youths under the age of 18 now who are accused of committing crimes are generally tried in juvenile court, where judges could determine their placement and treatment. But youths tried youth between 14 and 18 who are accused of crimes such as murder or specific sex offenses may be tried in adult court at the discretion of the prosecutor. This proposal would amend the state constitution to allow parole consideration for persons convicted of nonviolent felonies who have served their minimum sentences and passed screening for public scrutiny. It would also change the state law that requires that youth have a juvenile hearing, but would be whether or not they were determined to an adult court would be done by a judge, not by the prosecutor. Fiscal effect. A decline in this population is due to a measure that would require us to reduce the state $10 billion correction budget. County costs would increase due to the increase in probation, which is supervised by county probation officers. The new requirements for youth hearings would reduce the state costs and increase state juvenile facilities. A yes vote means that certain state inmates convicted of nonviolent felonies could be considered for early release. The state prison system could award additional credits for inmates for good behavior. And youth must be tried I'll get this straight, yeah? Youth must have a hearing in juvenile court before they can be transferred to adult court. A no vote means no change in an inmate release. The state prison system could be awarded additionally and sentencing credits to inmates. Supporters say 57 focuses on keeping dangerous criminals behind bars. Opponents say weakening California's anti-crime business laws have gone too far.
People in support of this, there's a group of wealthy Silicon Valley folks. I'm not sure what they have in common other than, maybe they were in a book group and decided they would put their money together. But the opposition is law enforcement in general.
Okay, now I don't do multilingual.
Okay, Proposition 58 has to do with English proficiency and the way we teach English learners in this state. The question is, should state law be changed to eliminate the requirement public schools teach English learners only in English, to permit a variety of language acquisition programs, and allow pupils to enroll in bilingual programs without a waiver? Federal law, state law, has required that we accelerate the way and the pace with which English learning children acquire their English. In about 2.7 million California kids as of last school year did not speak English at home. About half of them, or a little more than half of them, which is 22% of all California kids, were classified English learners, having limited English proficiency. As it currently, we have utilizing Proposition 227, which we passed in 1998, which imposed certain restricted ways California public schools could teach English learners. Classroom instruction could be in English only. Special materials could be used to improve language skills and make instruction more understandable. And pupils receive special intensive English instruction for just 1 year before moving to English-only classes. Enrollment in a bilingual program requires a waiver signed by a parent. State law does require school districts and county offices to publish yearly plans, describe the services they provide for certain group of kids, including English learners. This proposal would allow some flexibility for school districts. If you have parents who want a bilingual program, this applies not just for English learners, but if you are a parent of a child and you want your child, your native English speaker, to learn another language, right now you have to get a waiver, and you would not have to have that provision anymore. If the parents want this program, the districts could implement it. And with the local area funding control provision in California's budget process, the districts get the money and they decide how to spend it, and that is with parent-educator input. So there is an accountability piece, because it stands right now, all children who are considered not proficient in English are tested in the first 30 days of school. So every year you'd have data whether your program is working or not. So Prop 58 would repeal some key provisions of 227 and add a few new ones. They would remove the requirement that kids be taught only in English. It would allow a variety of programs, including bilingual instruction, and none of these would require a parental waiver. Community participation is increased. The planning process includes soliciting input from parents, community members, as how they want these English learner kids to be taught. And if parental requests for certain programs reach specified levels, schools have to provide them to whatever extent is possible. Removing the restrictions on Prop 227 would mean native English speakers could also be able to learn a language other than their home language. The state costs really are not impacted since we've already funded school districts based on how many English learners they have in their district. So it's up to the district how they choose to spend their monies. So a yes vote means public schools could more easily choose how to teach English learners, whether English only, bilingual, or some other type of program. And no vote means public schools are required to teach English learners in English-only programs. This is not just in English. It is that their curriculum, social studies, science, everything right now has to be taught in English. There is currently almost $10 million in funding to support, I beg your pardon. No, I humbly apologize. $1 million right now in support of this provision from education groups and a Ricardo Lara ballot measure group. I do not know who that individual is. I've not been able to find him yet. But it's all school workers and actually United Domestic Workers of America is in support of that one. And as of October 2nd, there is no funds in opposition and no political action committee in opposition to them. You want to do it or you want me to go?
You're on.
Okay. Prop 59. This has to do with Citizens United, and it is very unusual, and it is just a legislative advisory. It's not a law. It's not going to change anything in the Constitution. Our legislature has already proposed to the federal government that they would like to see legislation overturning the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. And that is the decision that made unions and corporations have the same free speech rights as individual citizens. And therefore, they have no limits on political contributions that they make. So our state legislatures have already done something about this, but this is asking you to have them in their very strongest authority to tell the federal government that they would like this Supreme Court ruling overturned. And it obviously has nothing to do with money. There's no expenditure really involved in it, so it's nothing out of the state coffers. All right. Prop 60, this is the light one. This is the adult film one. We're going to go through this really fast. And it's asking if performers be required to use condoms during filming and new requirements to ensure that that happens be implemented. Then they would be added to the California Labor Code. The other interesting thing is, should private citizens be allowed to file suit based on violations of those requirements? Currently, California is the leading producer of adult films in the San Fernando Valley. There are 4 major production companies, all 4 of which received some fines last year for not ensuring that their performers were adequately protected with condoms. This legislation would basically change the weight of the oversight from OSHA to private citizens in one way, because as it stands now, that you're innocent until proven guilty on this, but this would give them enough, OSHA would provide enough, have to have enough documentation that you're really doing all these things. They would be licensed, they have to prove that they can somehow, I don't know how you prove, but you prove that your performers wear condoms and that they're getting their STDs tested. And it's very, very specific about the onus of responsibility on this. And if you are, as a private citizen, note in some fashion that performers are not wearing condoms, you have the right to file a civil suit and make money off the deal. Obviously, the 4 people in opposition to it are the 4 companies, and I'm sorry I don't have their lovely names. Wicked something, they have great names. But if you look at Ballotpedia, you can find them.
Good.
And the people in support of it are the AIDS Foundation
Yes.
and healthcare workers.
Right.
Okay, Prop 61, state prescription drug purchases and pricing standards.
Yes, that's
The
it.
question on this one is, should state agencies generally be prohibited from paying more for any prescription drug, more than the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs pays for the same drug? Now, there's something like 9 million vets that the Veterans Administration takes care of through their hospitals. They obviously have some weight to negotiate. California has a much smaller group that we're talking about here. We're talking about current state retired employees, prison inmates, and some Medi-Cal enrollees. Right now, the state purchases drugs directly from these manufacturers, and then they get some reimbursement. The VA does publish a public database of the prices they pay for drugs. Unfortunately, because of some confidentiality agreements with the drug companies, not every drug is published, and its cost is not known publicly. So this would, Proposition 61 would prohibit state agencies from paying more than the lowest price paid by the VA. And it doesn't matter whether it's indirect or if it's direct to the drug firm. This is applicable only to the about 25% of the Medi-Cal recipients who are not in managed care, because the managed care facilities, they already negotiate drug prices because they have masses of folks, so they have some weight. There's a potential for the state to realize huge drug reductions, but there's obviously some uncertainties about this. Supporters say that skyrocketing prescription prices are a matter of life and death, and Prop 61 ends price gouging. It empowers the state to negotiate the same or better deals as the VA does. Opponents say it covers only arbitrary groups of patients, and it would result in the elimination of drug discounts that the state currently receives. The supporters are hospitals, Californians for lower drug prices. The opponents obviously are all of the large pharmaceutical firms. There is, just to note, there's like a 10-fold difference between opposition and support of this contribution-wise. There is about 10 times more money contributed to the opposition. So when you see TV ads, know that it's the pharmacy companies that are paying for those ads, just to know that. All right, there's a couple of death penalty issues. I'm going to try and put them together, 62 and 66. The 62 basically wants to know if you want it stopped. That's 62 is saying. Right now, people convicted of first-degree murder charge with special circumstances automatically pretty much get a death sentence. As it stands today, when you have a trial, you have a guilty or innocent decision, and if you are guilty, then you have a second trial for the imposition of punishment. We automatically then have an appeal, and most of them have a second appeal. And it takes between 15 to 25 years to work through the process. Since '78, California has sentenced 930 people to death. We've executed 13. 100 of them, 100 more have died in prison. It costs an average of $384 million per execution. Abolishing the death penalty saves $150 million a year. Right now, we have 750 people still on death row. Opposition, the death penalty system is broken, but ending it rewards murderers. It should be mended, not ended. There is a group of, again, some Silicon Valley folks who are in support, and some law enforcement who are against. 66 is related to that because if we keep the death penalty, 66 wants that appeal process shortened considerably, down to 5 years, so that you have to be done within 5 years of your sentencing. Now, that costs a lot of money, obviously, because people have, you have the price of the trials, and some of these folks have court-appointed attorneys, which taxpayers pay their fees. The fiscal effects of this, if it passes, are unknown, because initially you're going to have an increase because we have all these 730 people sitting on death row that now have to have their
Cases.
appeals quickened to within 5 years. So there will be an initial extra cost because they've been sitting there waiting. So the opponents say that it's confusing, poorly written, and is subject to legal challenges. Again, it depends. It's sort of interesting. It depends if the first one passes and this one. If one passes and the other passes as well, the one that has the most votes
Yes,
wins.
right. Kind of screwy way of doing it.
So that's something to know when you decide. Oftentimes I see people who said, I don't know what to vote on that, so I don't vote. It can make a difference. It definitely makes a difference.
You want to take on marijuana?
Sure, I'm going to jump to 64. Marijuana legalization. We're one of a number of states with marijuana issues on the ballot this year. This is not the first time this has come to us. We have already authorized medical marijuana in this state. It was explained to me very differently. Past marijuana initiatives have been written like they were smoking dope. This one is not. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. There is I believe six agencies who will be in charge of regulations. There are taxes that will be in. Great limitations are imposed on this. So the question is, should marijuana be legalized in California by adults who are over 21? So currently, people who possess less than 1 ounce of marijuana, which is like 40 cigarettes maybe, could be fined. Selling and growing marijuana could mean jail or prison. The state is currently beginning to regulate and set standards for medical marijuana use. One thing to always remember, regardless of what we do at the state level, the federal government considers this illegal. They have not they consider it a
Marijuana.
class
Yeah.
a prohibited drug.
Right.
So they have chosen not to enforce those regulations, but that is something to keep in the back of your mind. This legalizes marijuana for adults 21 or older. A tax. This is the big gotcha on this one. You're talking billions of dollars of taxes would be raised through this initiative. A tax of 15% on retail sales of marijuana. There's a cultivation tax for flowers and for leaves. There is and you also, of course, have current sales taxes on medical marijuana. It establishes how you're going to spend that tax money. It names state agencies to license and regulate marijuana industries, and it also allows local regulation and taxation of marijuana. So local governments could decide anywhere up to whatever the state initiative says, down to absolutely forbidding it in their jurisdiction. The only thing they cannot stop is if you transport it through on the roads. If it's in the back of your trunk, they can't stop that. There's advertising and labeling standards, restrictions on products, so that you cannot market directly to children. It permits resentencing of the individuals previously convicted for activities now made legal and destructions of those records. It nets, the fiscal effect would be to bring in state and local revenue that ranges from high hundreds of $1 million to over $1 billion. They just don't know. But the amounts depend on how state and local governments regulate and tax, because there could be additional taxes at local levels. And whether the federal government enforces their laws regulating marijuana. Proposition 64 would reduce government costs by tens of millions of dollars annually because of the decline of marijuana offenders now in state prisons and county jails. So supporters say this brings in revenue over $1 billion, and it ends the criminalization of marijuana, and it adopts the best practices from states that already have made it legal for adult marijuana use. Proposition 64 says it would increase highway fatalities because right now we have no DUI standard.
Right.
Part of the funds that would be raised from this are very specifically called out that go into research. One of the research topics is how you determine if someone is driving while impaired, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or marijuana. There is a large proportion of the funds that go to education and covering the cost of implementing this legislation. And again, it's legally, or it's some wealthy individuals that are in support of it, and some law enforcement that is in opposition to this one. You want to do plastic bags?
Oh, that's such fun.
Because I'm going to have to run.
Well, we have plastic bags. What it amounts to is if you have 65 and 67, and they might cancel each other out.
Well, we have a law that says they're banning plastic bags in the state. They just haven't implemented it.
Right.
Because the plastic bag people were getting this initiative on the ballot. So we're talking about one-use, single-use carry-out bags, not the produce bags, but the ones that they give you at the check stand.
Right.
That's the bags we're talking about.
Right. However, if it says if both 65 and 67 pass, a statewide ban on eligible single plastic bags will go into effect. Period.
Well, the second one, 67, says the money that they make from selling those bags, because of the law that is on the books right now that's not implemented, says they have to charge 10 cents for the bag.
Right.
Right now, as it stands in the first initiative, the stores keep all the money from the sale. And I know that, I'm sure some of it is the cost of the bags, but there's some profit to it too. And the 67 says that that money goes to environmental causes, cleaning up the mess.
Yes, right. That's a tricky one. Tricky one.
Mm-hmm. So you have to read what you're saying,
What
you're voting for.
Right. Now, you don't have any questions, right?
I do urge you, again, if you this is the condensed version of that massive publication that you received in the mail, and consult League of Women Voters website, Ballotpedia.
Yes.
There's lots of resources out there. But thank you so much for coming. It shows that this is why we like to live in this community. You're interested enough to want to know what's going on.
Yes, thank you. This has been a fun experience.
Thank you, Karen. We didn't do firearms, but that's okay.
Oh,
We're going
gosh.
to move on from that.
Well, that's something, they can think about firearms on their own, okay?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, the firearms one is just about adding another, there's already stuff on the ballot.